Elections are a fundamental part of the American system of government, which was founded on the principle that the power to govern resides in the people. This year's general election is scheduled for Tuesday, November 6th, and coming up, we'll talk with Lori Edwards, Polk County Supervisor of Elections. Make sure you stick around. Hello and welcome to Polk Place. I'm your host, Brian Lacey, and joining me in studio is the Supervisor of Elections, Lori Edwards. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Fresh off the success of the primaries and getting ready to go into the general elections.
Right.
How'd the primaries go off?
They went great, and you know what surprised me the most? More Polk County voters voted than I expected. We had excellent turnout.
And of course, that's, with the training that you do with the staff, that's just a kind of a precursor to what's coming up. So let's talk general elections. So it's election time again, and do you really expect it to be busy?
I do. Once again, I think that a primary election taught us that the people are enthusiastic and engaged about the election this year. And why it surprises me a little is in the presidential elections, you expect a high turnout, you expect a lot of engagement. Generally in the midterms that dips off, and certainly we won't have as much turnout as we did in a presidential, but I see a lot of enthusiasm.
So what will the folks be voting on this time?
People are going to be surprised. That ballot is jam-packed. We have 16 constitutional amendments on the ballot. There's a lot of attention already to the governor's race and the U.S. Senate race. There's a county commission race, there's school board, there's legislative races. So I think people need to be prepared. There's proposed changes to our Constitution and our county charter. I think they need to be prepared, do their studying in advance, and be ready for this ballot.
And as usual, you guys always provide sample ballots. Talk to me a little bit about where folks can find those, please.
Those are more important than ever. As I said, 16 amendments. You don't want to see those for the first time cold on Election Day. We'll mail them to every voter's home. Additionally, they're on our website, which is polkelections.com. We're happy to mail you a sample ballot if it's just easier for you. If you want to just pick up the phone, you can call us at 534-5888. We're happy to stick one in the mail. And then finally, there's one in the newspaper, usually about 2 weeks before Election Day.
Lori, what happens if someone won't be around to vote on their precinct on the day of the election?
That's a good question. More and more people are more mobile. You could be that you're just out of town for the day. Maybe you're heading to Tampa or Orlando, or maybe you're really out of town for some reason. They have lots of options. One is they can vote by mail, either from their home before they leave, or the location that they're going to be at if they're on a vacation for that time period. Additionally, they can go to one of our 9 convenient early voting sites for about 11 days before Election Day. So it just kind of depends what your schedule is and how you'd like to handle this.
What if someone, say, just moved to the area? What's the cutoff date, and will they be able to vote?
That is a good question because, as you know, we have so many folks moving in here to Polk County, Brian, and so first of all, the cutoff date, if you're moving in from another state, was October 9th, and so more than likely you missed that. However, if you're moving county to county, if you were in another place in Florida, that's actually just considered an address change. However, we prefer that you do it before Election Day. In fact, we prefer that you do it now, not the day before Election Day, even the week before Election Day. We prefer to have that information now. And why it's important is then you'll know where you're to go vote on Election Day.
What would happen if, say, somebody couldn't make it to the polls on Election Day?
Well, hopefully they took care of that in advance, because the bottom line is there's 3 ways to vote, and your last opportunity is up until 7 p.m. at the precinct.
So there's really a common misnomer, vote by mail ballots only count if there's a close race.
Oh, yeah.
Is that true?
I hear that all the time. I have been hearing that every 2 years for 20 years now. This is the urban myth that won't die. Yeah. I don't know why. Well, I don't even know what's keeping it alive, but people tend to think that their vote by mail ballots don't count unless things get really tight. And that's just not true. We take excellent care of the vote by mail ballots. We really do. We treat them like they're our own, like they're our treasured children. And as a matter of fact, we do our best to count those first and post those as the first results from an election to kind of drive that point home that yes, they're important. They're the first votes we count.
I give it this analogy, but voting is sometimes like going to a restaurant. If you get there at a certain time, there's really going to be a long line. How can folks avoid those long lines?
That's a good point, because you know, a number of years ago, and not even here in Polk County, but in other places around the nation, I guess it was 2012 perhaps, there were long lines, and people now are still concerned about long lines. I would say if you want to avoid long lines, I can 100% guarantee you won't have a long line if you vote by mail. So that's an easy way. If you're really worried about a line, just request a mail ballot and take your time and vote at your convenience. But if you like to vote at your precinct, if you come between 9 and 5, if your schedule will allow you to come kind of middle of the day, you'll be fine. The only time that you can pretty much count on a line at a polling location on election day is maybe from 7 to 8:30 in the morning. That's when we're usually busy, maybe a little bit at the end of the day from 6 to 7 at night. So I would say anytime in the middle of the day at your precinct, you're probably not going to have a line. I do concern myself, there might be some lines at early voting. Early voting is becoming more and more popular, and we keep adding more sites, but still, that's where we tend to see more lines. So I would stay away from early voting, look at voting at your precinct or vote by mail.
Now, do you have any tips or reminders for the folks voting in Polk County?
We sure do. First, in advance of Election Day, I know I said this earlier, but I don't think I can say it enough. Study those issues in advance. Like I said, it's a big ballot. You're going to want to know what you're voting on before you walk in. So I want you to study the issues in advance. Another thing is your polling location may have moved or changed. So double check your precinct before you go to vote. And you can do that on your voter information card. Then on Election Day, don't forget to bring photo and signature identification with you when you come. I like to remind people, if they have young people, kids in their family, bring the kids with you to vote. It's really a good experience for them. It's so important, and I run into so many adults who remember voting with their parents as a child. It's a very memorable experience for them. It teaches them the importance of democracy. And let me see if I had any others. I told you about the ID, and no, I guess that's the main things to, oh, I know what it was. Thank your election worker. Thank your poll workers when they come in. They're members of our community. They're probably your friends or neighbors or members of the same organizations you are. And they got up early and they went to training and they're trying hard. So even if maybe they're a little slow, whatever, give them good feedback and tell them thank you for serving our democracy.
What's the easiest way for folks to get election results?
polkelections.com. Now the thing about that is, and we will have those on there immediately from the precincts, from the early voting sites, and from vote by mail. The thing to keep in mind is it will just be how Polk County voted, but that's kind of interesting too. And then you can go to other sites to find out the statewide results.
One of the things that we hear really a lot in news is the election process and the security of the election process. Could you kind of go over that and really put the folks' mind at ease at how the process goes? Sure.
You know, there has been so much attention to election security, I'd say in the last year or 6 months anyway. The truth is, your election office has been worried about or concerned about and working hard about security for a long time. We didn't just wake up yesterday and say, hey, we ought to keep these elections secure. What do you think? So we have an awful lot of things in place. Among them, your election tabulation equipment never, ever attaches to the internet, okay? That in itself cuts down a big amount of any way that anyone could intrude. Another thing is we have a lot of physical security that keeps our election equipment safe. Just doors and locks and locks and more doors and seals, as well as security cameras and passwords. So we have a lot of layers of security protecting our election. On top of that, though, if anybody does any research about election security, the first thing that they're going to find is the best way, maybe the only way to go, is paper ballots. And we have paper ballots here in Polk County. We test the equipment before it goes out on Election Day. We have everybody vote on paper. And then after the election, we actually audit by picking a couple precincts and a race randomly, and then hand counting to make sure that the equipment did what it was supposed to.
One of the coolest experiences that I've ever had was being in your office upstairs on the day of election. It starts off slow, but when things start coming in, it is very cool how the whole process takes place. Talk a little bit about, you know, the hustle and bustle of election day.
That's a great way to describe it, hustle and bustle, because we, as your election office, have 25 people that work year-round to keep things going. And on election night, there's about 1,700 people coming to the office to bring back the results from the precincts, to accept those results, to be in touch with the precincts that aren't in yet, to take care of that equipment, to check the seals, to make sure the ballots are safe, to make sure things are getting where they need to be. So it is very exciting. As you can imagine, all the election office staff by election night are tired, but there's so much adrenaline and we enjoy it so much that it's truly a passion.
Well, as usual, always a pleasure having you on, and a wealth of information to our residents that are going to be out voting on the 6th of November. So thank you for coming in, Laura.
Thanks, Brian. Always good to be here.
All right. The Supervisor of Election maintains the list of registered voters for Polk County. The Supervisor also qualifies candidates for county offices and receives candidate campaign financial disclosure reports. The office administers all elections and provides support for municipal elections, secures polling places, hires and trains election workers, and provides information and statistics on voter registration, voters, and the election. This year's general election is scheduled for Tuesday, November 6th. Now, if you need more information on polling places, ballots, candidates, make sure you check out the Supervisor of Elections website at polkelections.com or give them a call at 863-534-5888.